Welcome back to the channel. We're going to continue working on our 2012 Lexus IS250. Last time we got all of our pieces pulled and squared, cut all the stuff out of our way so we get that rail out of there. Today we're going to see if we pulled everything to the right place and try to get that rail in there, make sure everything lines up. If it does, we can go on and put the rest of our parts on. So let's find out if it's good news or bad news. The moment of truth, we're going to find out if our rail fits, if I pulled it in the right spot. So it sleeves over that front piece of the rail, and then it slides in between the wheelhouse, and then part of it slides up against the back of the wheelhouse. This is actually two pieces, but I didn't want to take them apart. Just extra work. Didn't need to be done. It actually slides underneath the inner piece. We'll set our gauges, see if everything lines up. We did scribe lines on the front where our old one was. We'll see how close we are. And we'll put a clamp in so we can clamp that inner piece tight up against the back rail here. We'll probably end up putting some self-tapping screws in there to hold it in tight. That's really the only clamp I can get in there. About 6 inches in from the back of the rail, there's a plate welded in there, so I can't get a long clamp in. We'll tap it into place. Make sure it's nice and tight in there. Then we can weld it up. And once we have that done, we can go over here and start grinding off our body panel with our die grinder. Doesn't this guy own a belt sander like all the other YouTubers? How does he do this? So we'll grind off all of our spot welds the cheap and easy way, because I'm not one of those rich YouTubers and I can't afford a belt sander. Actually, I can. I have one. I just don't like it. And once we have ground off all of our spot welds and annoyed all of the experts in the comments, we'll use our scraper and knock all these loose. And our body hammer, in case we missed any of those tool experts in the comments. We didn't grind all the way through on a couple. There's 2 panels up here at the top, so we'll grind those off real quick. And then we just twist it off. Still no gloves. And the safety experts are taking it hard today too, I guess. So we'll pull as many as we can off of there. The ones that won't play nice, we'll use our scraper to knock them loose. We don't want to bend up that floor piece. It's pretty weak. They must have used that Playdonium from GM's hinges. So, tear out our seam sealer, and you know what we do with this. Now we can take the top piece of our quarter off. We just cut it with the air chisel. Now we're going to cut it a little closer to where we're going to need it, so that we can fit our quarter over it and line everything up. Before, it wouldn't slip all the way over. Pry it off of there, up from underneath that other panel in the back. Then we'll grind off our spot welds in the door opening, and we'll cut the bottom of the quarter, where we're going to put it into the dog leg. Actually, it's slightly higher than where we're going to put it in. Be careful on the edge here, because the other panel is right underneath it, so we don't want to go too far. Extra work for the welding gnome. A couple of spot welds we need to drill because it's a double panel. We'll drill those out. And we're ready to pry our panel off of here. Move this blanket. And we'll slide our scraper in there and knock off the welds we didn't grind all the way through. In the pile. So now we can dry fit our used quarter panel and rear body panel from Scott's Lexus Emporium. I just left it all together. It's extra spot welds I don't need to take off. We'll slide it into the package shelf. And we'll clip it over our old quarter
That's why we left it a little bit long. Give it a couple of hits with our quarter adjusting tool. Make sure it's clipped in there. And we'll put a clamp on it so it doesn't end up on the floor. Maybe 2 clamps. I'll slide the body panel in on the passenger side, then put 1 clamp on that. Close our door and see how bad our day is going to be. Gaps aren't too bad. Now we'll try the deck lid. It's only 4 bolts, they're self-aligning, so hopefully it fits. Start them by hand. We can start them with the impact the next time. We'll make our own threads when we don't have to take it off. Again, we'll leave it for the next guy. Our deck lid closes, so maybe our day isn't going to be that bad. We'll put our bumper reinforcement up just to hold the bottom of the body panel to our frame rails. We're just going to put 1 bolt in each side. Deck lid opens. The taillight on the passenger side is the original taillight. The taillight on the driver's side is the used taillight. It's off of an 08. It's a little bit different. There's a little bit different lines, and it's got orange in it instead of white. So we'll have to get a new one, but for right now, it'll work for lining stuff up.
I bought this deck lid because it was an extra 100 horsepower. So before all the experts tell me it's not 100 more horsepower, it's just the engine size, I'll explain that I do know that for Lexus, these numbers are the size engine it has. So the 350 has a 3.5 liter. This is a 250, so it has a 2.5 liter. If you have an LX 470, you have 4.7. You have an IS300, you have 3.0. RX 350, 3.5. RX 330, 3.3. And so on and so forth. Pretty much holds true with all Lexus vehicles. So this one now has a 3.5 in it, because the badges say so.
So we can have a look at our gaps. They look pretty good. Gap's a little wide in the front on the quarter, but that's because the top and the sail panel won't clip all the way over our piece underneath. You can see it sticking up there. Our door gap looks good. A little dent there. Circled it for the bodywork gnome. And our gap's a little tight on the bottom because it's overlapping that other panel. Now we're just going to scribe our lines, and we're going to make our final cuts. Since everything fits, that's where we're going to want to cut it. Since we were dry fitting this quarter anyway, it makes sense to just mark all of our cuts now instead of trying to make templates after we take it off. Saves a little time, and hopefully keeps all the time management experts in the comments happy. You know, the ones telling me I'm wasting time doing things.
We're going to pull everything off of here. We're going to put our backings in on our 2 seams here and here. Everything else is in the factory location, so we can just weld it all up. We don't have to put any backings in. We do have to, before we put it up next time, make sure we put our glue in here and our foam so that it stays where we put it. And then we got this piece up here to change, and a little bit of prep work, and then the painting gnomes and bodywork gnomes can show up. We do have some broken bolts for the license plates that we're going to have to get out of there. Pretty common on Toyotas. Thanks, Toyota.
So now we can pull it all back apart again. Pull the bolts out of our reinforcement here. Probably drop them inside the reinforcement. At least I'll know where that rattle's coming from, and there'll be a few less bolts in the center console. Open our doors and our deck lid, and slide our quarter out of here. Then we'll go clean up all of our spot welds. Get it ready to go back up there later. Now we're going to cut and the lines we scribed in there, we make our final cuts on this quarter panel. Somehow, through bad luck on the last cut on the quarter panel, I cut it in about the only spot you couldn't cut it, which was right through where all the foam is on the back side. When we put our new foam in there, we need to be able to weld it away from that area. So that's why we're going to cut it up a little higher. We'll put it in over there. There's a couple of spot welds to grind off on this piece. Then we'll slide our breaker in there. And all that's really holding it is the rest of the foam. So we'll just use our breaker to scrape the foam off the back of it. No need to heat it up. We can get a scraper in there. Work our way around. Then we'll save this little piece. It'll become our backing. So we're not going to toss it in the pile. Now we're going to cut the bottom of our quarter, or what's known as the dog leg. So a lot of times when I change die grinding discs, I save the smaller ones, and it's not because I'm poor. Well, actually it is because I'm poor. But it's so that I can use the smaller discs in corners like this. Because if you have a bigger disc, in order to get it into the corner, you have to cut deeper into the panels on either side of it. Sometimes there's panels behind those that you don't want to cut into, because then you have to use extra duct tape to hold the car together. So with the smaller disc, you don't have to cut as deep into it, and you don't have to worry about the panels underneath. So that's why I use them for these little corners. So we'll get this little corner cut, and then we can use a larger disc to finish cutting off the rest of it. We want to use the larger disc on the rest of it because, one, it spins faster and cuts faster, and two, with the larger disc, it actually keeps you going straight. The little disc allows you to turn it a little bit more. So we'll cut what we need to cut once we get out of the corner and out of harm's way. We're going to feed our little disc here a little protein and let it grow up big and strong into a full-size disc. And our full-size disc is ready to go. So we're going to continue cutting our line. Let's see you guys do this with a belt sander. I guess you could. It's going to make a heck of a hole in there. And if you're wondering why I give people such a hard time about the belt sanders, the belt sander, the belts for the belt sanders, cost about 5 times what these discs cost, and they don't last 5 times longer. They're also not any faster, and I would be willing to bet might even be slower than using the die grinding disc. So to me, not worth it. Besides, I'm more comfortable with a die grinding disc. But I get it. The experts who have never done this before see everybody else using it and think that they're letting me on to some new secret. They're not. We'll knock our spot welds out of this little piece. And we'll knock the glue off the back of it. We'll save that piece. It's going to become our backing. So, it did become our backing. Our backings are in there, welded up. They have weld-through primer on it. We put weld-through primer on everything else. We primed all the parts we're never going to see again inside of our quarter. We put our weld-through primer across the back where our body panel is going to go, and up the quarter on the other side. So our car side is all prepped and ready. Now we'll go get our pieces ready, and then we'll throw them up there. Now we should be ready to put our quarter on here. We have all of our panel bond and our foam ready to go. We got about 15 minutes of working time, so let's hope we get this in one shot and in less than 15 minutes. First thing we had to do was slide it underneath the package shelf. It's sandwiched in between there. Then we can slide it over our backing up on the top of our quarter. Then we're going to head across the back, make sure that we're not getting stuck on anything else, that we'll have plenty of movement. We're not going to clamp this in just yet. We want to work on the hardest to move parts, which are the middle. And that happens to be right about at the back of the wheel opening. It's easy to move the ends because they're not attached to anything. They're a little more forgiving. So we'll start with the middle, that once we clamp up the ends, we're not going to be able to move. And we need to get clamps in here because we do have our adhesive on our wheel opening. So we want to get that nice and tight in there because, like I said, we only have 15 minutes before it doesn't do anything anymore. So So we want to make sure it's in place before we get there. Somehow, this quarter is 4 years older and still the spot welds lined up with the panel that was underneath. Doesn't happen. Usually you can't count on that, but it just so happened that on that portion it did, so I kind of knew exactly where the quarter had to go. I could just line up the old spot weld holes. Maybe push our dog leg over our backing and try to find that clamp we had 2 seconds ago. There we go. Now we're going to push our quarter in to line it up with our piece of the quarter that's still welded on. We have to use our quarter adjustment tool to push it in a little bit before we clamp it. Now we can head over to the back. We're not going to put the reinforcement on this time, but we are going to put the bolts in it, all 4 of them, because we want to make sure those holes stay lined up, and the more bolts we put in, the less clamps we have to use. It'll hold it tight up against our frame rail so that we can just weld all of our welds that are around those bolts. We'll tighten those up. We'll head over to the other side. And this is the easiest side to move around. Got a lot of leverage since it's all the way across. And if I pulled it right and measured it right, all of our bolt holes should be lined up. We're going to put the body panel right back where the old one was. Describe some lines. So it should get us pretty close. Close our deck lid and see about it right. Deck lid's a little bouncy because we don't have a trunk gasket in there. But it'll still tell us if our gaps are right on the sides, which is all we're really concerned about. Push the quarter in and put a clamp up on the sail panel. That'll close up the gap in the front of our deck lid. Close our door and see how that fits. If all of our gaps are good, we can start welding. And since I'm wearing my welding helmet and putting on the welding gloves, I guess everything fits. It's time to start welding. First we have to put a blanket on the car because it's cold. And because we don't want to burn it to the ground, as we have in the past. I don't want to talk about it. So we're going to start welding. We're going to do little spots here and there, especially in our seams in the quarter, just to keep it from getting too hot and warping. We'll just kind of bounce all over, weld it all up. We have to move our clamps. We don't have enough. A lot of people say that they've never seen as many vice grips as I have. Well, if you check any welder's toolbox, they probably have just as many, because the more clamps you have, the faster you can weld. You can set up all the clamps and just keep going on welding and hopefully not have to move them. If you got to stop and keep moving the clamps around, it just takes more time. So the more clamps you have, the faster the job gets done. It's worth spending a little bit of money, especially when time is money. If I got paid by the hour, you could bet I'd have 1 clamp and we'd just move it slowly but surely and get this welded. But since I get paid a certain amount of money for this job, I need to get it done as fast as possible. That's how I make it profitable. I mean, not profitable. I don't make any money doing that. All my money is made on YouTube. At least that's what the experts tell me. And they know far more about my business than I do. Now we're going to take all of our clamps off and throw them on the floor. Make sure we didn't miss any welds. Make sure they all look good.
So we have our rear body panel and our quarter all welded up, and I have the sunburn to prove it. So that's as far as we're going to go today. Next time we come back, we'll go ahead and throw this piece in. It goes right here. Just a few spot welds. Should be pretty simple, but we have to take the deck lid off, and we'll do that next time. We'll also have the grinding gnome come in and grind all of our spot welds down, and then the bodywork gnome can do his job. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take sh**. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take sh**.